She appeared in more than 100 movies, yet even in her 60s she was still playing supporting roles. It was television that made her a star, bringing her the role of her life at the age of 78. In this video, you will learn about the actress who became the unanimously accepted personification of the famous female detective Miss Marple. This is the incredibly inspiring life story of Joan Hickson.
Well, I think the clothes are all of a pattern with the language and intended to have the same effect.
Oh, but he was an adorable baby.
Well, according to his picture in last Sunday's paper, the Cheviot murderer was an adorable baby.
When someone says the name of Hercule Poirot, most of us imagine the detective impersonated by David Suchet. Well, there is the same unbreakable bond between the looks of the British actress Joan Hickson and the elderly spinster sleuth Miss Jane Marple. Yet, interestingly, fewer people would recall her name, and almost no one would be able to say anything about her previous career. Oh, and there definitely was something before that part. The decades-long limbo of housekeeper roles, the late success with the most prestigious nominations in the world, and the visionary act of Providence, which sort of postponed that reward almost to the final curtain.
Oh, I see. Well, do sit down. Thank you.
Joan was born more than 120 years ago, back in 1906, in a middle-class English family of Alfred Harold Hickson and Edith Mary Bogle. I came from a family of school teachers who were very well educated, and I could read when I was 4. At the age of 5, Joan was taken to her first pantomime, Cinderella, and she knew at once what she wanted to do. "I was utterly entranced," she said later, "and asked my parents to move as near to the theatre as possible. I knew immediately that the life I wanted was there."
What happened after that? You asked me what happened after that. I'll tell you what happened after that. She talked and he talked and he talked and she talked and then... No! I can't.
That first impression made Joan truly passionate about acting. During the years of the First World War, she used to entertain the wounded soldiers. She would sing and her mother accompanied her on the piano. At the same time, her relatives weren't too happy about her ideas of becoming an actress. They knew nothing about the acting world and were obviously trying to be protective of the young girl's future. My Aunt Aggie, she was about 4 feet tall, drew herself up to her full height and said, "What is John's destination to be?" which she thought was the gutter, you see. Hickson once recalled in an interview.
But what I got was a picture of a woman who's frightened.
Is that what you think it is?
What would you call it?
I should call it a picture of a woman who's had a shock. A very unpleasant shock.
Luckily, the young Joan was quite a tough nut already and didn't crack under the pressure of her family, and soon after leaving school managed to enroll at the famous Royal Academy of Drama in London. There, the young students were usually given the new play to learn every Monday morning. You never knew what it might be, a farce, a thriller, anything. You had 5 days to rehearse it while performing whatever else was on every night. Hickson obviously regretted that this type of hard but wonderful training was no longer in practice by the end of the 20th century.
Long wait for very little.
The younger generation. Well, I don't know.
Her first appearance in 1927 was in a provincial theatre company as an aristocrat in His Wife's Children. A year later, she would make her debut in London as a maidservant. Unfortunately, for years, well, decades after that, she was typecast as that perfect servant, a housekeeper, some not so important character who comes in and out of the stage with some feature bits of text while all the eyes are set on the main stars shining. Perhaps that was the trait she shared with another Miss Marple of the past, Margaret Rutherford, who took center stage in one of my previous videos.
Yes? I'm Jane, from Mrs. Binster's employment agency, the new maid.
Well, you look old enough to know better. Come in.
You see, just like Margaret, though in a slightly different way, of course, Joan wasn't a typical female heroine directors of the past would love to see on stage in key parts of their plays. In other words, she didn't correspond with the unanimously expected beauty standards of her epoch and was, sadly, sort of cursed to appear mostly in Westend comedies, often taking on the role of a slightly batty aunt or a befuddled middle-aged woman, characters with names like Mrs. Pottle or Mrs. Mould. I wasn't beautiful, so there were plenty of character roles. I never did any Shakespeare. I'm far too superficial for that. I just act instinctively. Joan used to be brutally honest with herself in regard to her own acting abilities, sort of bowing to this fate of being a character actor and not a star.
She is wonderful. Oh, no, I wouldn't have liked it at all. All that flummery and pretense. Far too theatrical. Oh, dear me, no. I wouldn't have been good at all, no.
Sounds unfair, right? Or perhaps everything happens all in good time. Meanwhile, in the 1930s, she was engaged with different theatre companies, often touring the resorts in summer with various levels of success. Sometimes we had proper stages, sometimes not, and on the whole we were pretty poor. I remember one engagement when none of the holidaymakers were interested or bothered to come. We played in a corner of an hotel and lived on biscuits. Nevertheless, that was a particularly happy time for the actress. In 1932, she got married to the love of her life, Dr. Eric Norman Butler, with whom she lived a quiet family life, raising 2 children until he died in 1967.
What you've told us so far doesn't mean very much, I'm afraid, my dear. And yet I'm sure that what you have to tell us is important. Now, let's start again.
For the next half of century, Joan Hickson became one of those prolific character actresses who were sort of bread and butter of the British theatre and cinema. Their roles weren't big, so was the income, so they sort of filmed in all sorts of movies by day and performed in West End productions in the evening. As a side effect, this contributed to their professional versatility, making them always in demand with directors in both movies and theatre. Hickson, though, has always preferred acting on stage to working in film or television. Playing to an audience, that's the real acting. And she remained active in that medium through the 1980s. All in all, her career on stage lasted for 60 years and was crowned with a prestigious Tony Award as the Best Supporting Actress for her Broadway performance as Delia in Alan Ayckbourn's Bedroom Farce in 1977. This event prompted The Guardian to comment that this actress has long been undervalued in Britain.
He said, "She has a lovely face. God in his mercy lend her grace." The Lady of Shalott.
As for the crossroads with Agatha Christie, Joan Hickson connected with her stage and screenplays 40 years before she finally became Miss Marple herself. The first time happened in 1937, when Hickson made her appearance in Christie's British film adaptation Love from a Stranger, based on the short story Philomel Cottage.
I never expect to get me a man. Mr. Uncle George Hobson says I ain't quite bright, but I'm willing.
Then, in 1945, Hickson played the slender role of Miss Price in a Westend production of Christie's Appointment with Death. What a providence of fate! Christie happened to sit in the audience one night, and for some visionary reason paid particular attention to that brief episode with John. Imagine, I guess this was the true magic moment when something clicked, yet only the heart of the author could see it in the 40-year-old actress.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
How can I help you, madam?
Oh, I only wish you could. I sometimes feel we have no control over what our eyes decide to see or not to see.
The very same night, Christie sent Hickson a letter congratulating John on her performance. The author also left a pathetic postscript that read, "I hope one day you will play my dear Miss Marple." It's funny, yet Hickson didn't take it too close to her heart then. Well, I'm afraid I tucked the letter away in a drawer and forgot about it. Yet the destiny didn't.
Now look, the pots and pans are on that shelf there over the stove.
Oh, yes?
And the groceries and provisions in there.
Thank you.
What's your own?
But before that, there were other interesting interconnections. 16 years later, in 1961, MGM released Murder, She Said, the first of the 4 film series loosely based on Christie's books, where Miss Marple was played by the already mentioned today Margaret Rutherford. The two were great friends. They often shared theater stages from the 1930s, and Rutherford even became the godmother to Hickson's son. Well, in that MGM movie, the role of, you guess, exactly, the super important role of the housekeeper, a cleaning woman, was awarded to Joan Hickson.
Good day.
Good day, Mrs. Kidder.
What's the matter with you?
I was merely being polite. Charming, isn't she, Jane?
But wait, there is more, as they say. Almost 20 years later, she was chosen for a minor role in the TV production of Why Didn't They Ask Evans? This Agatha Christie novel doesn't feature either Poirot or Miss Marple.
But tell me, did she really? I mean, was she really dressed as that woman said?
All in all, Hickson had about 100 films and numerous television roles under her belt. Curiously, she preferred to speak about that achievement with a certain irony. I watch these old films in black and white, and suddenly the door opens and there I am. The other day I was wearing the most awful hat. Remember, I said that for the major part in her career, she actually remained a character actress. Well, guess what? Perhaps that actually worked for her longevity in this profession, saving her from burning out for the most important part in her life. You see, character actresses were not constrained by their looks and age as opposed to the stars, main heroines, whose careers were often short-spanned, being heavily dependent on their physical appearance and rules of the genre. Hickson once said that she felt sorry for her star colleagues from Hollywood. They're so afraid of growing old and losing their looks. All that plastic surgery they have, it must be so awful for them, dreary.
I came to offer you some advice,
Oh, my God. The League of Decency.
which I hope might help in the difficult time ahead.
What are you talking about?
Curiously, Hickson's own type was that she was sort of the essence of ordinariness. The thing that prevented her from taking key parts when she was young became a blessing. She was able to play a variety of supporting genre roles irrespective of her physical metrics, and this way finally see her time come. So to say, for Hickson, age became a career opportunity. It is not so bad for me being so old. I have a corner of the market. You can't fake wrinkles.
Marple! Miss Marple! Miss Marple, telephone!
Oh, thank you, Cherry.
Interestingly, yet back in the mid-20th century, there were indeed few roles for elder actresses. Somehow, the stage directors in theaters and later in cinema and television preferred to pick young beauties and often modified the original roles of elderly spinsters to better fit the younger actors' cast. The same happened to the characters of Agatha Christie's mysteries. In my video about the origins of Miss Marple's character, I said that Christie first introduced this type of female sleuth in one of Poirot's cases. I think it is possible that Miss Marple arose from the pleasure I had taken in portraying Dr. Shepherd's sister in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Christie wrote in her autobiography. She had been my favorite character in the book, an acidulated spinster, full of curiosity, knowing everything, hearing everything, the complete detective service in the home. When the book was adapted as a play, one of the things that saddened me most was Caroline's removal. Instead, the doctor was provided with another sister, a much younger one, a pretty girl who could supply Poirot with a romantic interest. Hilarious, right? Well, these were the times when they somehow preferred not to feature an elderly woman as the main character.
I saw something quite peculiar just now.
Really?
First of all, Ralph Peyton is here and staying at the White Hart.
Staying there?
Staying there. And he was talking to a girl.
Perhaps that was one of the reasons why Rutherford's Miss Marple films were turned into light-hearted comedies, which was kind of daring step aside from the initial idea of the author. 8 years later, after Agatha Christie's death, there came a time that BBC decided to try a different approach to this detective mystery and portray Miss Marple exactly the way the author wrote her. A seemingly fluffy and disorganized spinster whose vast understanding of human nature and formidable, clear-eyed intelligence helped her solve the mysteries that visited her village with uncanny regularity. And of course, no one could do it better than Joan, right? Moreover, Christie herself anointed her for the role.
What a coincidence,
isn't it?
Nevertheless, Hickson had doubts about whether she should take the role. I'd never really thought of myself for the part, but when I was offered the chance to do so, I decided to give it a bash. I knew if I turned down the opportunity, there'd be another 30 actresses queuing up to jump at the chance, recalled Hickson, an Agatha Christie fan herself. John's neighbor at the epoch added fuel to that fire of doubts. When I mentioned to one lady in my village that I'd be picked for the TV series, she looked horrified. After another eyeing me from head to toe, she said, "Oh, my dear, you can't play the part. Miss Marple's short and fat." Yeah, right. Well, it's actually soothing to know that Joan Hickson didn't take it seriously and didn't waste the most generous chance in her life.
Now that is the key to the whole business.
As a result, critics noted that Joan Hickson's portrayal of Miss Marple left no doubt that she was a particularly annoying little old lady who kept sticking her nose where she was not wanted. Some would sarcastically add that her Marple was indeed far from likable, and that one can only wish that she might one day be the murder victim rather than the discoverer of the murderer.
Dolly, now you're going to have to do something for me. I want you to talk to Dr. Petrie. Yes, because he's behaving just like Mussolini.
The actress herself once said that to her, Miss Marple was a splendid person, because there was nothing you could say or do that would shock her. A small, bird-like lady, the sort you would hardly notice in the village high street, yet she'd know everything there was to know about everybody else.
How much do you know?
I should like to know more.
I shared my personal views on her playing this part in my detailed video with a retrospective of Miss Marple actresses. Yet, indeed, we viewers are often fooled by her elderly looks, like what she could possibly understand and how she could even cope with the often too complicated cases. Just as fooled are the police guys and the witnesses and the murderer, who all begin to talk too much or make mistakes they would have been too cautious to make if they had taken her seriously.
In fact, someone must have seen something. They must have. The trouble is, most people don't know what they've seen.
And then, by the end of the film, she carefully unfolds all the details of the murder with her signature, "Well, obviously," or "Of course it happened this way."
Are you suggesting that the missing schoolgirl is in some way connected with the death of Ruby Keene?
Of course.
How?
Well, I don't know how.
And then adds,
"More tea, Vicar?"
which sounds like the ultimate mic drop for everyone.
Thank you, Miss Marple.
Not at all.
You played the part just as one envisages it. This verdict was reportedly given to the actress by no one else but Queen Elizabeth II, who was said to be a huge fan of the series. No wonder that in 1987 the Queen awarded Miss Hickson the Order of the British Empire.
Oh, they're not releasing the body. Really?
All in all, starting from the first episode, Body in the Library, that aired in 1984, BBC produced 11 more films. The last one, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, was released when the actress was already 86.
Oh, I love Miss Marple, yes. I love her very much. I had a wonderful time with her. I played so many different kinds of parts. And I can honestly say that I think I've loved them all.
Retirement is fatal, once said Hickson. The brain and the body get atrophied. She definitely followed that motto and continued working even after the Miss Marple series ended in 1992. You can listen to her voice recordings of audiobooks of Christie mysteries that were narrated in that period.
In spite of her innocence, or because of her innocence?
Joan Hickson died from a stroke in 1998, when she was 92. I was never the star, because I don't think I've ever been a great actress. I've never done anything except get on with my work. In some ways, I'm probably just like another Miss Marple. When I'm not working, I'm living quietly at home in a small village where I spend all my time in the garden. Unlike Miss Marple, I've never stumbled across any murderers there, which is probably just as well.
Well, how can you say that?
Well, don't you see? That was a smokescreen created by Marina Gregg herself.
Another difference from the famous sleuth is that Hickson was lucky to enjoy a rewarding personal life and a large family. By the time of the release of the last film, she had already become a great-grandmother. The story of Joan Hickson is the story of patience, humbleness, decency, and hard work. Just like so many people, she seemed to have few spectacular prospects in her life. Imagine, there was no television when she was born and even when began her career. Yet she was able to keep up with the times and change with them. It was TV that made her a star, finally bringing her the well-deserved fame and admiration of millions of fans in so many countries across the whole world. She truly flourished in her 80s. Isn't that the greatest reminder that you are never too old for anything, and it's not over until it's over? Thank you for watching this episode from my series about the great actors of the past. I hope it was a time well spent, and I'll be happy to see you in my other videos.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you very much.